The oil pan over the cross member. So you see how deep the oil pan comes down here, right? To get it over this cross member here, I had to tilt the engine forward. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but the front end of the engine is quite a bit lower than the back end of the engine. And the idea is there, you just lift this pan over, and then after that you can lower it and then right the engine, get it level again in order to get this part of the head to go below the sill there. That way you don't have to jack up the frame or cab or any of that kind of crap. I did have this in to the point where I got the oil pan by, but then I got stuck on the engine mounts. So that's what we're going to try that difference. Okay, a couple of tips for getting this big sucker into this hole here. I'm going to completely remove the engine mounts with these guys here. Two of those in the front, two of those in the back, and of course there's one engine mount each side. Reason is you can't get the head below this part and get those engine mounts above the receivers on the frame, those guys. It doesn't seem to want to happen. So I'm going to get the engine in there and then hopefully install the engine mounts afterwards. And the idea is, you know, I can't get it by this aspect right here. So hopefully this works out. We'll see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this number 5 injector lead here, and this guy here, the engine lifting lug there, I'm going to reverse it. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with this guy here, we'll see. And the idea behind that is this chain here, right here, again won't clear that sill because it sits back there so far. So if I reverse it, it'll come to the front, you know, gain at least a couple inches out of it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, one of the things I have to explain quickly as we're looking out at this beautiful view, which is completely unrelated to, you know, changing out the Cummins, is that the rear lifting eye, I got a torch and a hammer and I smashed it until the lifting eye moved forward quite a bit. I did that for two reasons. One, it would further clear the sill at the top of the cab there. And the second reason was it did get into that injector plug towards the rear of the engine. And so they couldn't occupy the same space, so it had to be bent. Because I bent it and you know, I took probably a little bit of strength out of it, I welded just a piece of 1/4-inch steel on the outside to strengthen it. So kind of like a gusset, a triangular gusset. And in that way I could lift on that eye without fear of it bending back into that into the injector harness connector. Okay, one quick note. The modified bracket that I made back there, you can see it pointing out. It did work really well. It got the engine most of the way in, but still I couldn't get it that last bit. The chain was still binding on the top there. So what to do? Well, what I decided to do was I put a floor jack underneath the truck, and I just picked up the back end, just took the weight off the back end, and then I put a block under the front of the engine and I dropped the engine down on the jack and the block, just real gently. And then what I did was I took the engine hoist and I took a bolt out right here in the intake manifold and I strung it across and just picked up the front of the engine with the engine hoist. And between the two, between the jack and the engine hoist, I was able to massage it back into the right spot. And then the challenge was to install the bolts on the engine mounts, and it was a challenge. We had to wiggle it back and forth. For the most part, what we did was we used a strap and connected it to the frame, just whatever I could pick up. In this case, it was up here next to just a piece of sheet metal, and connected that to the engine, and we could pull the front of the engine back and forth, left and right. We could raise and lower the rear of the engine or the front of the engine based on the jack and the hoist, and we were able to line up the bolt holes. And you know, it's not easy, but we got them done. One thing further, the next time I do it, I think as you can tell, there's two portions. There's the steel portion that attaches to the block, and then if you look, there's a rubber portion there that attaches to the steel. I took the whole engine mount off, and I think next time it would be smart, and I think it would work, just to take the rubber part off, and that way you only have 3 bolts on each side to deal with, plus the 3 bolt. But anyway, she's in. Thank the Lord, she's in. Yeah, that was a pretty serious job right there, and I'm not quite done. I still have to remove that rear engine mount back there, and I have to get the number 5 and 6 fuel injector tubes back on so it doesn't get dirty in there. And then after that, I can call the engine installed.